This story begins in an office, where the protagonist works in the advertising department of the company Big Glory. What a name for a company, right? Sounds like a magic card name. The protagonist is one of those people who live solely for work, and his boss threatens him, saying the company is laying off a lot of people, and he needs to make an effort. The boss even gives him a list of potential clients to call. Despite being very tired, the protagonist starts typing until something strange happens. A strange image appears on the computer screen and everything starts to distort. When his coworker asks if Howard is okay, the protagonist, with his hand over his eyes, takes a moment to respond but says he's fine. Howard's coworker reminds him not to forget that they have dinner with the boss tonight. It might sound nice, but the protagonist thinks it sucks because in the end, they have to split the bill, and for him, who earns poorly, it's not worth it. His coworker notices that he's not into it and offers to lend him some money. Seriously, what a great coworker. He mentions that the new director will be introduced today, so they can't afford to miss it. And speaking of her, look who's coming. Her name is Sabrina Luo, and as she passes by, the guys are all dumbstruck, and the protagonist says that this woman is out of this world for someone like him. A few hours later, everyone is celebrating and socializing with their coworkers, everyone laughing and eating peacefully, but the protagonist starts to have the same problem he had at the office, and his iris starts turning blue, and suddenly his nervous system was connected to some kind of system, and an image above him that only he could see. And the image begins to say, "Of course they can't see us. Star Universe Limited strives to bring the best experience to its customers and achieve groundbreaking innovations based on virtual reality. We calculate and design for all sensory organs, including your mind. That's why we are capable of silent communication." But the protagonist, not understanding anything, says he never bought anything virtual reality related and doesn't have money for it. But the image continues. "You will be the tester of our specially made dreamland, where you will have many different life experiences. Think of it as the high-end version of a VR game."
Throwing flashbang!
The protagonist, like any other softie, says he doesn't want any of that and that he has to go to work tomorrow. So the robot tells him that the system is capable of taking a copy of each person from real life and if he wouldn't like to live life as a different person. But before the protagonist can respond, his boss arrives with the new director Sabrina to introduce her. The boss introduces her to the employee who's the biggest suck-up he has. When it's the protagonist's turn, the director asks him his name, and he starts to introduce himself, but is interrupted by the boss saying he's nobody and that he has mediocre skills. But in reality, it's all a lie because we see that the protagonist was indeed very skilled but didn't suck up to the boss, so he resented him. Then the director says she understands and leaves with the boss. The protagonist's colleague feels a little sorry for him. When it's time to leave, everyone starts saying goodbye. Howard is upset saying he worked so hard but wasn't recognized. His friend tries to console him saying that to be recognized you just have to suck up to the boss. But in a flashback we see that this guy was a leader defending students back in school, and the protagonist says that now he is totally different from what he was before. He succumbed to the system. Then the boss appears telling the director she doesn't need to waste time with the insignificant ones, but she doesn't pay much attention to him, and says she knows what she's doing and the protagonist overhears everything. The boss, realizing he heard, gives him a hint about people who deserve to be fired. Howard gets angry and says he'll resign tomorrow. But to calm him down he asks the system to send copies of the boss and the director to this dreamland. Errors in the instructions. The system can only scan one person at a time based on the requests made. The system determined that the target to be scanned will be Sabrina. The protagonist is caught off guard and the robot says the scanning on Sabrina is complete. When Howard gets home, he gets mad at the robot because it didn't say before that it could only scan one person at a time. The system detected a strong increase in dopamine in your brain. The conclusion is, you're loving it. Howard is embarrassed by the truth thrown in his face. But he's not wrong. Who wouldn't want a hot woman as an NPC in their game? The robot says the system will be activated at midnight, so the protagonist needs to find a safe place to sleep. Howard says that's easy. The problem is he's too nervous to sleep, but the robot says it was expecting that and will interfere with the part of his brain that activates sleep and will make him sleep. Then the system starts and Howard starts seeing things as his heart races, but he falls asleep. And in the blink of an eye, he wakes up on the ground, and right in front of him is a woman with cyberpunk-style leg bands. The woman introduces herself as AI-63, an artificial intelligence and administrator of the Dreamland system. Howard is somewhat confused, and the woman explains to him about a shop system and credits where he can buy things that might be useful in the future, such as a knife that costs 2 credits, a truck that costs 40 credits, a temperature-controlling jacket that costs 20 credits, a food package that costs 1 credit, or even an infinite energy battery costing 200 credits. The woman explains that as he completes challenges, he will earn points, and he asks if he has any NPCs he can use. She replies that with 10,000 points, she herself would be at the protagonist's service. She informs him that the Dreamland is about to begin, and if he has no other questions, to prepare as a portal to an apocalyptic world has opened in front of him, and he is sucked into the portal. But he wakes up in his bed, so he wonders if what happened was real or not. However, as he woke up at home, he believes it was just a delusion on his part, and goes to take a shower to go to work. But the bathroom has no power, so he changes and goes downstairs from his building. When he steps onto the sidewalk, the street is strange with debris and empty vehicles. He also doesn't see anyone nearby, but he starts to hear a noise that gets louder and louder until suddenly, an out-of-control plane appears and crashes right in front of him. The plane explodes, and the protagonist is thrown away but manages to survive by hiding behind a car. The Mimic Dreamland Doomsday Survival has started. What would you do to survive if all the people in the world suddenly vanished? The difficulty level is 0. You have 180 days to fight this battle. The protagonist doesn't stay in shock, saying, "What do you mean, 180 days?" But as Howard complains, the sound of liquid dripping sounds in his ear, and when he crouches down, he realizes it's gasoline leaking from the car. Another explosion throws him once again. A little while later, and the protagonist, feeling a bit calmer, comments that another plane crashed into a building after the incident we witnessed. And because all the people in the world disappeared, things like this can happen. He's making a list of supplements he considers essential to survive, and since he has 180 days, he'll take the opportunity to have fun, playing loud music on the street, dressing however he wants, and doing whatever he pleases. He also remembers that Sabrina was supposed to be in this world too, but he hasn't found her yet. The protagonist hears something and looks back to see, but it's just a dog passing by. However, the problem is what's coming behind the dog, none other than a tiger. It lunges at Howard, and to the surprise of both the protagonist and myself, it's friendly. It seems that now that there are no more humans, it escaped from the zoo and has always been raised among humans. So it leaves, and the protagonist is amazed at how detailed this game is. Howard starts having difficulty finding water, and without power, the food starts to spoil, and now there are worms everywhere. Without food, he won't last long. While he's carrying water in his car, he takes the opportunity to loot a restaurant and finds a generator along with a freezer with fresh meat. Now he can make that his shelter. During the day, he loots places, and at night, he plants seeds and fertilizes them with the rotten food. The guy is a genius. But after these 31 days, loneliness starts to mess with the protagonist's head. He starts seeing his friend inside the car with him, saying things. Anyone who watched I Am Legend will get the reference. The protagonist says the city has turned into a dump and there are flies everywhere. And at night, he feels worms crawling on his body. He's going really crazy. Suddenly, a light shines on his face, and he brakes abruptly, spinning on the road and hitting none other than Sabrina's car. She finally appears, and now Howard will have someone in place of his mannequin. Sabrina wakes up not knowing where she is, notices that someone has bandaged her, and she's wearing men's clothing. When she leaves the room, she notices the diesel generator and a fresh meal on the table. She finds Howard shaving. After all this time without seeing anyone, he must want to look presentable for her. Howard says he cooked for her and invites her to eat together. She reveals that they already knew each other and asks his name. He introduces himself as Howard Chin and thinks the game also managed to copy her memories. Sabrina is impressed with everything he has done, the electricity, the food. He just says he was lucky and asks how she spent this time. She says everyone had disappeared, and he is the first person she has met since then. Howard asks what her plan is from now on, and she says she still doesn't know what she's going to do. So he suggests that she move in with him. If she gets sick, she would have someone to take care of her, and they could live much better there. Without a better choice in this world, she accepts the offer. But right from the start, she makes it clear that he's not her type. and she wants to keep her distance. The protagonist is incredulous at what he just heard from her, but as the only interaction they have is with Donald, the mannequin, he accepts her terms. Sabrina explains that she won't take advantage of him and they can share tasks. He says it's a great idea and that they should sleep because they have a lot of work to do the next day. Even without saying anything, he didn't feel good after being rejected by the girl. The next day, Howard wakes up to a loud noise and wonders what Sabrina is doing. He leaves the room and sees a bunch of boxes scattered around, so he asks her what she's doing. She says she's going to use the warehouse as a bedroom, and if he needs her, he can ring the bell. This makes him very irritated, but he controls himself and asks where the mannequin is. According to her, the thing was too scary, so she threw it away. He says she should have asked first. The mannequin was like his Wilson, the only friend he had all this time. In memory of Donald the mannequin, the best and only friend we ever had. Sabrina says she will fetch the mannequin if it's so important, but Howard leaves angrily, saying he'll do it himself. After everyone disappeared, he took some weapons from the police station and put them in a box. And on the first day with the girl, he noticed that a pistol had disappeared. Howard returns to talk to her and says it's better for each of them to wash their own clothes and make their own food, so they'll see each other less. She won't have to be alert all the time, and he won't feel strange when he sees her. Sabrina says that as a woman, she has to protect herself, and even though she's beautiful and rich, he won't be a gentleman just to make her feel good. He really hasn't gotten over her throwing away his doll. He also says that even though he's not a gentleman, he won't hurt her. 3 months have passed, the weather is getting colder, and the foul smell has dissipated. Sabrina is tending to the garden. Thanks to her, they now have vegetables to eat. They've hardly spoken since their first fight. She didn't seem to mind, but he can't bear the loneliness, so he talks to the mannequin as if it were a real person. He tells the mannequin they'll look for meat today, asking if they might get sick from eating spoiled meat from the market, or if they could eat rat meat but might die if there's a virus in it. Fortunately, he decides to try his luck fishing. Before going, he visits his other friend at the zoo, who happens to be none other than the tiger, surviving by eating other zoo animals and what little the protagonist brings him. Suddenly, the tiger behaves strangely, running towards some deer nearby. Howard notices that the zoo deer have no antlers, so these must be wild ones invading the city. Heavy rain begins with thunder and strong winds. The protagonist realizes it's not just a storm but a typhoon approaching. He rushes to the car, asking the mannequin how a typhoon could have formed so quickly, then remembers he's in a game, and the typhoon must be part of some challenge within it. Howard also remembers that Sabrina is out biking in the mountains, and must be near the top by now. He drives back home hoping to find his only real company in this world, but only sees the pots she was caring for, all destroyed, the door wide open, and he starts calling for her. With no response, he heads towards the mountain. The typhoon worsens, and he finally finds her. The girl is leaning against a pole, and something happened. She has a serious injury on her leg. She asks if she's going to die as the protagonist carries her. With a serious look, says that's not going to happen. They take shelter from the rain in the mountain mansion. Sabrina is all wet and trembling from the cold, and Howard asks to take a look at her wound, as stubborn as ever, refuses. He angrily tells her she'll end up dying if she keeps it up, but she continues to refuse help, saying she can take care of herself. Howard reveals he has a plan for the situation. Since they don't know how long the typhoon will last, he thinks it's best they move to the mansion, which is higher than the shelter. They need to gather things from there as quickly as possible and bring them to the mansion. As Sabrina is injured, it's better for her to stay in the mansion, and Howard warns her to avoid being poisoned by the smoke from the fire, leaving her irritated for being unable to do anything. The typhoon only grows stronger. Snow even starts to fall, and it's amid this weather that the protagonist leaves the mansion and heads towards the shelter. Upon arrival, the place is flooded, and since the water isn't electrified, the generator has also stopped working. Howard tries to retrieve the vegetables they harvested, but a rush of water and wind carries most of them away. They find themselves in a tough situation, with enough food for only 2 meals, and in the midst of this, fishing or even resorting to rats is impossible. Frustrated with everything that has happened, the protagonist seeks advice from his best friend, the mannequin. With no answers from it, he heads towards his other friend, the zoo tiger. He finds the tiger covered in injuries and asks the tiger to help him hunt. The protagonist says he'll take care of him and tries to get the tiger into the car, but the tiger ignores him, sitting only at the zoo gate. Howard gets irritated, as if he were talking to a person and not an animal, and the tiger responds with a roar. He tells himself he shouldn't care so much about a game, accepts the tiger's decision, and heads to the car, leaving the tiger sitting alone in the middle of the typhoon. Howard is returning to the mansion, trying to sort out his thoughts along the way by conversing with the mannequin. When he arrives, something catches his attention. He stops the car, and Sabrina is lying on the ground. She explains she tried to fetch water to boil for them but fell and can't get up. Naturally, this irritates Howard. He carries the girl to the mansion, leaving her surprised, gives her a slap on the buttocks to scold her, and she yells, saying he'll be making decisions from now on. He throws her onto the bed, telling her he'll fetch the first aid kit, and she better not pull any tricks while he's gone. She screams she can take care of herself, and Howard retorts he's not pleased to have to help her, having enough problems of his own. He needs her to heal quickly to be of any help, or they'll starve. He tends to Sabrina's wound, and she asks what he plans to do now. He reveals he'll try to hunt the wild deer that started invading the city after everyone disappeared. The girl warns that if the deer caught his scent, they'll always be on alert when he approaches. He ponders on this for a moment, saying it doesn't matter much since they have weapons. Speaking of weapons, he found the pistol that had gone missing under her pillow when he went to get supplies at the shelter. He returns it to Sabrina, who asks if it wouldn't be better for him to keep the gun. He says he'll leave the weapon with her as a gesture of trust and bids farewell, needing to prepare for the hunt the next day. It's been 121 days since the game began. The mansion is covered in snow, and the protagonist is preparing for his first hunt. He thinks the deer must be in a suburban area slightly below the mansion, and now feels pressured by Sabrina's words. Having never killed even a chicken, the protagonist isn't confident he can kill a deer. As a precaution, he's also taking some fishing nets. Unbeknownst to him, he's being watched from afar by a pack of wild wolves. Howard arrives at the hunting spot, and the cold is bone-chilling. By the noise, the deer are nearby. He quickly turns, runs towards the sounds, and prepares to shoot, but once again the animals have fled. He's lost count of how many times this has happened. Every time, Howard hears the animals close by, rushes to them, and loses their tracks. He recalls Sabrina's words. It's as if they know all his moves, and he's just wasting time. Tired of the hunt, he heads to a river to try fishing. The current is strong due to the storm, but he's desperate for food and casts the net. The current starts pulling the net, and he tries to hold on tight because it's his only net, and he can't afford to lose it. Suddenly, the net is pulled with great force, and he can't hold on. Howard is dragged into the middle of the river and falls into the freezing water. The protagonist emerges from the freezing water, trembling with cold, thinking only that he needs to get back home and warm up before he dies of hypothermia. But he spots a deer right in front of him and hides to not be noticed. He can hardly believe it. This is the chance he needed. He searches for the rifle, but unable to find it, he'll have to make do with a shotgun. He aims at the animal, takes a deep breath before shooting, but when he fires, the recoil is stronger than expected and hits his face. The shot hits the tree beside the deer, which manages to escape. Now, in addition to almost freezing, he's also injured his face. Feeling stupid after losing so many resources and getting injured, he wonders if he'll end up starving to death. At that moment, he hears a noise and turns around. Behind him are some wolves, and he grabs the shotgun in case he needs to defend himself, but they realize they might get shot and leave. The protagonist finds it strange that they backed off but decides it's better not to waste more supplies. Howard returns to the mansion and enters the room. Sabrina is warming herself by the fire, seemingly wearing only a blanket, and she's surprised when the protagonist starts undressing. After all he's been through, he just wants to warm up a bit, and she says, embarrassed that he didn't need to take everything off. Amid his clothes, she sees a photo of the protagonist with a girl in his wallet. Sabrina asks if the girl in the photo is his girlfriend, but the protagonist says she's his ex-girlfriend. She continues to be curious and asks why they broke up. He explains that he wanted a family, but the girl wasn't ready for that, then asks if she had someone before everyone disappeared. Sabrina says yes, Her boyfriend was a doctor from MIT and the head of a big company. Howard finds it surprising that such a talented guy had such bad taste in women. This time, she turns irritated. How could he say that about her? He's left speechless, and she realizes she was rude and apologizes. Unaware, the blanket falls, and her breasts are exposed. She yells for the protagonist to leave the room, and he leaves, thinking about the wonderful sight he just had. The next day, the protagonist goes after the deer again, but all he manages to do is see them from afar. Whenever he tries to get closer, they disappear.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. See you in the next video. Bye for now.